Welcome to the Andover podcast. Just a quick disclaimer, none of these opinions reflect Andover or the Phillipian as a whole, but our own opinions. My name is Leilani Glace. I am a 10th grader or a lower here at Andover, and I am from New York City.
My name is Gracie Aziabor. I'm a ninth grader from Atkinson, New Hampshire, and I'm a day student.
Hi, I'm Adaora Mbanefo. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm an upper.
So, recently we've just been thinking about education and how Andover or the outside world, how the education between those two compare. And so I just wanted to pose a question. What do you think sort of the goals are of education or schooling, specifically at Andover or in life in general?
I mean, for me personally, I think education is to prepare you for the future, whether that be, whatever you need it to be. But Andover specific, it's quite literally a college preparatory school. Therefore, they're preparing us for the next stage in our life, which is university, which I find is fascinating because oftentimes I feel like Andover does a really good job in that because many people do say that, it's really easy to succeed in university after Andover simply because of the rigorous academic program, but also the lifestyle that we've become accustomed to, living in dorms, and also having that connection with teachers, etc. Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think that the main thing about going to a school that's so kind of prestigious in the world of academics, especially in terms of boarding schools, I think another main thing that Andover does a really good job at is just giving students a lot of resources. I think that's what the education is really good for, is giving students connections and the knowledge and the language and learning all the things that they need to that will help them, prepare themselves for college or even past college when they go out into the world and they're, citizens of whatever country, and they're getting jobs and everything. I think that the main thing that Andover strives to do is just build a good foundation for the students that come through it so that as they go through the rest of their life, they feel prepared.
And I also agree, but one thing I have noticed is that I feel like because Andover is so focused on sort of getting you into college, getting you that good school, getting you into like successful internships or jobs, I find there's a lot of other things maybe missing. Like for me personally, I feel like there's not very much like cultural education.
That's true.
I find there are a lot of spaces as to which you can sort of get that culture experience as a Black person. I can see that, with CAMD and also with like BSU and Sisterhood that's coming out. But I find that like in classrooms or like other spaces, it's very like strict, get into college, keep your head down, like keep going. And I find that there's like that's kind of missing in the curriculum itself.
I mean, I can definitely see where you're coming from, but from my experience, I think your Andover experience 100% depends on your teachers because I know, one thing about Andover that some people can see as a pro or a con is that teachers have a lot of liberty, especially in the English department, to really teach what they feel is best for you. Obviously, they have some set points that they have to get past. But I know in English, some teachers maybe won't discuss many instances of race or identity, but other teachers, there's a lot of focus on that, and it's really great to see that outside, inside your classroom as well as outside. But then even, it's harder, for example, in subjects such as math and science, whereas there's some teachers who, I had Miss Olander my lower year for a term, and she was very big on, celebrating those underrepresented voices in, areas of math. And I think in science, another way to be applying that is to understand that originally science was racist. Originally science was a fluke. And, obviously we've developed it as time has gone on and it's improved immensely. It's very essential to discuss the past of science, what it was and what it is now. Some teachers do that, some teachers don't. So maybe making that more ingrained into the curriculum, whereas teachers should be having discussions even in math, even in science, which it is harder, but it is possible.
I definitely agree with that. I think even as a freshman, I think I've been very lucky to have teachers this year who have definitely tried their best to incorporate a more diverse perspective into classes, whether they're STEM or humanities. In English, I have Miss Toussaint, and she's doing a great job of really kind of trying to break the Andover Bubble perspective that a lot of students have. I think it's really, even if you are international, which I'm not, but like coming to Andover, it's really, really easy to just immediately find yourself like thinking from the Andover student perspective. And sometimes you kind of just like forget about, how other people might see the world when they're not at your very small boarding school, right? And I think that the important thing is that you kind of just have to, and I think this is also like in terms of what the Andover curriculum is like now, but as a student, you kind of just have to search for those conversations. I think that's really important because, in English, obviously you're gonna have those discussions about like intersectionality and all of those things. And depending on who your teacher is, like in my math class, like we've learned about like how, race and gender can affect like your career in mathematics, for example. But I think in general, just because based off the way that our school teaches the students and what the school's priorities are, I think at this very moment, like students need to seek these things out. Like how we said with CAMD or joining affinity groups and all of these things. Like I think that is where the super important conversations about, race, identity, all of those things, I think that's where it lies at the moment. I'd love to see change with that. Like I'd love to see those things incorporated into daily classes more and more. But I think just because this school is focused on giving you the information and the education you need to get you into college, a lot of the things that we were just talking about, like identity and all of that, they're not going to be incorporated into the classes because like you're not going to need that when you're going to college and you're majoring in like engineering. So
Yeah, I found like what you're kind of saying is really interesting because I feel like you would need that, to understand how to navigate your relationships with other people in your group, in your domain. And what you were saying about seeking out that, I feel like that's one thing that is very interesting about Andover is that you have to seek it out. And a lot of the times, like those who should be seeking it out don't, and that's the reason why there's such a gap in terms of like understanding culturally and also just being engaged in like diversity and discussion surrounding issues like around our world. Those who already have that knowledge, already have that understanding, they want to seek out further knowledge, whereas those who just don't know or like don't understand like too much feel either ashamed or just don't have the care to be seeking it out. So by already incorporating into curriculum or just like adding these elements and these components, students are given the ability to be like, oh, okay, I've already introduced this, so I'm not going to come in knowing nothing. I'm going to come in understanding and already strengthening my knowledge and being an educated and a quote unquote like incredible Andover student.
I definitely agree because I think that it's one thing to sort of like Gracie was saying, to like find that space for yourself, because I think like when you find that space for yourself, whether it be an affinity group, or a club or just anything, it's sort of like you brought yourself into that and you can like you make a space for yourself in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's like it really like helps shape you as a person when you like decide to continue, if you decide to continue with that club. But at the same time, I do understand what you're saying, Adaora, because I feel like, speaking sort of on the Andover Bubble, right now, we're not really told, or I think we all know, though it may not be explicitly stated, that when we go outside in the world, identity, race, all of these things, culture, are going to affect us no matter what we do, because the world is not a perfect world at all. And so I do think that it is both our job, but also Andover's job to make sure that, yes, they are a college preparatory school, and yes, they do have a job to make us like prepared in terms of academics so that we can face the rigorous level at which we would need to be for college. But at the same time, there are setbacks that we as humans, especially as Black people, cannot really overcome that easily and should be aware of that sometimes it's hard to admit it, but sometimes we do need to try a little harder than maybe our average white friend or something like that.
Right.
I think that's important.
I definitely agree with what you said. I think there was the one statement where it's like when you find yourself in an affinity space or a club with like which you identify with most of the people in it, you're kind of creating that for yourself. You're creating that space. And I think that's a really important thing as Black students at Andover, that maybe the school doesn't teach you throughout the curriculum, but you learn throughout your experiences that the main way for you to kind of improve and like seek out more knowledge is to take the sense of agency for yourself and to advocate for yourself. I think that the main thing is, like, this school originally was not built for us, right? Yeah. And as we found ourselves coming into this space, we have to realize that the change did not technically match up with it.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of change to be made, as we all know. And I think the main thing is that until the institutional change where, culture is commonly discussed in classes, and the education of the Black experience in America doesn't start with slavery, but it starts with the African diaspora. I think that main thing is it's just important to kind of take control of your own experience at Andover, because there's not someone who's holding your hand, guiding you throughout the entire thing, telling you, okay, first you do this, second you do that. And I think that is, although the school doesn't explicitly prepare you for that, specifically Black students, I think that is an experience that most Black students at this school can kind of connect with. Just because it's something that you just like naturally are, you're built to do it, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like kind of like I loved your point, Gracie, but kind of back to what Leilani was saying about the Andover bubble in terms. I felt that like obviously there are different opinions because it's like, we're so sheltered here, we don't understand, but at the same time we are students, we are children, and this is supposed to be a safe space for us. So one thing that I really do appreciate about the Andover bubble is that I am seemingly like protected in these ways, whereas if I was more open, like, yes, I'm affected by racism on this campus, but the racism I'm experiencing on this campus is controlled, is that I can go to my house counselor, I can go to LCG, definitely. I can be like, this is happening, please can you do something about it, and something will happen. Whereas in the outside, they're like, it'll happen, and I'm just gonna have to suck it up and, move on. So, that's one thing I really appreciated about it, but I feel like people really do like misconstrued like the idea of the Andover bubble, where it is, I see it as one thing, a shelter, but like a safe space, but as well as, they're saying you don't know anything about the outside, which I don't think is necessarily true, because we do, like, the school as a whole does try to, like, when things are happening, bring these conversations in. Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And sometimes it can be a little surprising because it's like, oh no, like, I don't really think about the outside world when I'm in here, because it's, it's not an everyday part of it, but we're also, I feel like that can, in one way, protect us. And yes, it can also, the whole idea of ignorance is bliss, but we are not overly ignorant in where it's harmful, but ignorant enough for where we are safe.
Yes. And I think it's always important, like you were mentioning, like, you have people here. And I think that is one thing that is nice about Andover, the fact that, house counts, just having, like, a point person in general is just really nice to have, because that they are there for you. And, I mean, I feel like in the world, oftentimes there isn't, like, maybe really a designated person that is there for you. I mean, you have your family, but oftentimes you have to go out of your way to find that person. And that is good in some cases, because I feel like you build a closer connection when you go out to find that person. But at the same time, I mean, it's kind of off topic, but at the same time, I like having, like, that designated person and they know what's happening. Like, it's not like, when you were saying about, like, the Andover bubble, it's not like we're ignorant enough that it's, like, harmful, we don't know anything about the outside world. It's just oftentimes I feel maybe we oversimplify some things. And so I think it's just nice to have that person to be able to go to and to talk to. And just like, it's just nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like, I mean, like, not to, like, as you said, like, not to veer too much away from the subject, but I feel like that's one thing, like, I also have, like, a big comment on about, like, a new disciplinary system with the second gap, whereas I'm, like, I understand that this is obviously a campus where they want to see us grow, but also this is not, like, a rehab or just, like, a place to change in that way, because you are coming to this community where everybody is incredibly intelligent. Everybody wants to be here, and you're surrounded with people from all walks of life, and to come into this space knowing what Andover is and still find a way to disrespect that and the people within this community, I feel like, after you've had your one chance to learn, which is why I was like, very for Gap 1, because it's like you taking your chance, you're not like just, saying bye, you messed up, but it's like, this is why you were wrong and I hope you change. But the idea of a Gap 2 really bothers me in the sense that it's like, okay, you've had this. You went through your process of learning and growing, and yet you still did it anyway. And how, like, at this point, like, this is a community where you're actually causing real harm, and like we said, we're the Andover Bubble, and within this bubble, we're supposed to be safe, we're supposed to be protected, and we're supposed to grow. And it's really hard to grow when there are people over your shoulder who don't want you here and don't want you to succeed there, and they, prohibit your success in whatever means they see appropriate. So that was just one thing that I like really connected with the Andover Bubble, is that one is it's a safety mechanism, but as well as it's also a I don't know what the word for it, but it's also
Punitive almost?
Yeah. Exactly. Precisely.
I also wanted to say also about the gap too. I think you brought up a really interesting point
Wait,
about.
can we just lay down what is the gap too?
Okay, growth and accountability plan.
So like once you usually receive a growth and accountability plan after you're getting in level 1 or level 2. Level 2 or 3 disciplinary action, which usually surrounds harm. They usually measure that with like how much harm did you cause to yourself, to your peers, how much worry, etc. That's usually what constitutes whether something's in level 1, 2, or 3, as well as just overall if you're following the guidelines of the school. So you usually after you experience a level 2 or 3, you receive a gap where you're intended to grow and understand your issues and how the school as a whole can better support you and your point people directly. And then a gap 2 has come from if you have another level 2 or example 3 of maybe a different nature, you are again given that chance to grow after an extensive period where you were supposed to have already learned to grow. So
Right. And I think you bring up an interesting point, how the gap plans kind of intersect with the Andover Bubble. Because I think the thing is, when you create a safe space for children to kind of venture out and learn new things, try new things, some people, I think they take that for granted.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you create a space like that where, if you make mistakes, it's okay because you'll learn from it and maybe, hopefully, you won't do it again.
Yeah.
I think that just kind of encourages people to say if this is a space and a system for me to make mistakes and grow from them, I might as well just go out and do it on purpose,
yes,
right?
exactly.
And that was with the gap one. I was like, okay, I understand, and I think it's honestly better than just kicking the student out,
Definitely.
because you need to give them a chance to grow.
Yes.
With the gap two, though, I think it's interesting because amongst the student body, a lot of the things I've heard is that with an extra gap, what's even the point of following the rules?
Yes,
because if I get the first gap, my fault, that's on me. But I do it again, and you're still giving me a second chance. So what's stopping me from doing it again if I, And I thought that was interesting because it really just showed me how, it's just natural. It's human nature for people to make mistakes and take more risks if they know that they have a safety net to fall back on. I think that's the main thing. I think that adding a second gap, although I'm not directly criticizing it, I think that honestly it could just encourage a lot of students to break more rules.
Push those boundaries.
Simply just because they know that they might and most likely will get another chance.
Yeah, and I feel like exactly on that, this is me personally, but I feel like rather than employing a second gap, you should strengthen the first gap so it includes other issues such as, yes, you discuss substance use, yes, you discuss race, yes, you discuss identity, yes, you discuss gender and sex, for example. Yet, for you to have a second gap means the first gap was not effective.
Yes.
Therein, at some point, especially if you're having a repeated offense for the same issue, maybe then it's a sign that okay, maybe we need to go outside of Andover, because at the end of the day, expending so many resources towards helping those who, quite frankly, sometimes don't even want to be helped, and taking away from the experience of those who are on this campus and just want to feel safe and protected, you kind of have to weigh not whose experience or life, quote unquote, is more important, but rather what do we value as a community and who are we trying to uplift.
Yes, definitely. Guys, that was was good. Should we like end it here or do you...
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
this is so much fun. I love it.
I feel like this was such a productive time, you know, just discussing with fellow Black women about the Andover experience and just holding each other up and being each other's support and sounding board. So yeah, thank you, Phillipian. Thank you, Leilani.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Bye. Bye.